Fire Emblem Engage is a modern-day example of what I like to call a Jekyll and Hyde game. In many ways, it's one of the most impressive titles to come to the Switch in a very long time, and in others, it really misses the mark. Hi, I'm Pyrus from Pyrus Gaming, and today we dive into Fire Emblem Engage to decide if this new take on a classic series has earned its place in your collection. To start things off, Fire Emblem Engage is the first strategy RPG that I've beaten in a very long time. In fact, it's been such a long time that I can't exactly remember what the last one I beat was. I think it might have been one of the Shining Force series back on Sega Genesis. I mean, I get it, I'm old, give me a break. Engage has some impressive elements which have shown up in pretty much all of the major outlet reviews. But that being said, it's certainly far from a perfect game. While it has some highs that are truly glorious, especially considering the hardware of the Switch, the lows range from confusing and unpolished to downright absurd. As in, it's absurd that anyone that was developing this game could have thought it was a good idea. So today we're going to discuss my review of Fire Emblem Engage after completing the game. Now, to start things off, I am a relative noob when it comes to Fire Emblem. My entire experience prior to Engage was just a handful of hours I put into 3 houses just prior to Engage's release. So admittedly, I'm coming to this series as a bit of an outsider, but after listening to interviews with the developers, it seems like that's actually who they were going for with this title. The developers have been on record stating that they wanted to create a more approachable Fire Emblem for this time around. And in many ways, I think you could say they've succeeded here. When you get down to the heart of it, there are 2 main aspects to the Fire Emblem series: the gameplay of the strategy RPG, and then the life sim story, managing and interacting with your crew. The majority of the criticism that Fire Emblem Engage has received has been focused on the characters, the style, and the relationship building, all of which was the absolute strength of 3 houses. For me, I'm always going to come down on the side of gameplay, and while I enjoy deep narratives and well-developed characters, in the end, I just want to enjoy the game for the sake of the game. In many ways, that is the strength of Fire Emblem Engage. Developer Intelligent Systems has created a deep, satisfying, and challenging combat system that is wrapped in a slick and well-polished package. Now let's take a look at each element of Fire Emblem Engage to work our way towards a conclusion. Beginning with story and narrative. In Fire Emblem Engage, you are the legendary divine dragon Alear, a hero that has been asleep for 1,000 years. But as rumors of the evil Fell Dragon's return begin to spread, you suddenly awaken to a small group of followers who can't wait to fawn over every little thing you do. Alear has the classic protagonist amnesia, and cannot remember what being the divine dragon means, why she fell asleep, or even how it happened. This actually lends to a story that is very forgiving for players who are new to the Fire Emblem series, as Alear is just as new to all of these things as a brand new player is to the series. While there are returning characters from the Fire Emblem series, those characters' past do not directly impact the story of Engage. All you really need to know is that they were heroes in the past in this universe. The opening moments of Engage include a battle where Alear and her friends are saved by the current divine dragon, Lumera. But in protecting Alear, Lumera's power is spent. It is now up to Alear to reclaim the 12 emblem rings in order to combat the Fell Dragon and his minions. The emblem rings contain the power of 12 former Fire Emblem heroes, which can only be restored by a divine dragon or a fell dragon. This creates the basic plot of the game as Alear and her allies go from country to country searching for the emblem rings and combating the forces of the fell dragon as their paths cross. Now, I'm going to do my best to avoid spoilers, but this is where I feel the majority of reviews are a little off the mark. The story is set up as a simple one, and in a way it had to be because you're talking about a protagonist that needs everything explained to them. In this case, she's relying on information that she gets from characters that literally look up to her as if she were a god. Some of them even come out and tell Alear that they worship her. Now, if you consider the source, there's no way that the information that she would get from these people would be detailed with layered backstories. It would be generally accepted stories passed down for generations. Alear was asleep for 1,000 years. Almost none of the other characters have been alive that long. Now, the misstep that I do think the developers took is that there are a lot of elements that are set up for reveals later in the story, from critical items like how and why did Alear come to fall asleep for 1,000 years, to less consequential but more divisive elements like why does she have one red eye and one blue eye? And why does she have hair that looks like toothpaste? These things are explained over the course of the story, but several of them don't happen until dozens of hours in. There are some reveals to the story that were actually pretty well thought out and were not so easy to see coming, and others that felt like they were shoehorned in at the last minute and probably shouldn't have been strung out for so long in the story. And the developers do show an aptitude for doing this effectively, especially when they introduce some of the primary characters of each region. Characters like Fagado and Tamara, or Alchrist and Diamant, show progression, depth, and carried my interest, and it didn't take dozens of hours to do it. On the topic of characters, there are definitely some that I quickly sidelined during my playthrough. Being a new player to Fire Emblem, I based my decisions on who I took into battle and who I furthered the story with, either based on performance on the battlefield, characters who interested me or at least didn't immediately make me cringe, or other assets. Don't judge me. But there were still some that fought their way into my lineup, and I found myself caring about quite a few of them. Towards the end game, I frequently found myself struggling to take one character or another out of my lineup because I'd found so many to be so useful. Other characters will portray their persona in one way, and then, through the support dialogues, we learn that not everything is as it initially seems. Some of the cringiest characters come off that way because maybe they have a bit of a past that they're trying to hide, so they create a persona to prevent others from seeing the real them, but that's just what makes us cringe in the meantime because they're just not good at it. My biggest issue with the story has to do with how characters respond to some of the late game events. There are multiple times when a character has done terrible things, and yet they receive a pass from several characters in the group, and they even generate legitimate compassion from some of them. To me, if a normal person had been in that character's place and experienced those same things, I don't think there's any chance that they would show that kind of compassion to a character who had done what they had done. Maybe I'm just too cynical, but I honestly don't think so. I don't think the story is as bad as some would lead you to believe, and as such, I give Fire Emblem Engage a 3.0 for story and narrative. On to gameplay, and this is the star of the show. Fire Emblem has long relied on the core tenets of rock, scissor, paper type battling, and in Engage, they have taken it to the next level in a really good way. There are uses for pretty much every unit that you get your hands on, and even if a character is really powerful and over-leveled with one of the best emblem rings, one misposition or being too aggressive on the battlefield can lead to a quick and unceremonious death. In my playthrough, I played in classic mode, meaning that if a character died in a battle, I could no longer use them in future battles or develop their bonds any longer. I must admit, I was a little disappointed when a character who had died in battle did show up in the Somniel and in several cutscenes after their death. I would have loved to see a version of this game where the deaths really mattered to the story, and that just isn't the case here. They're just sidelined from battle and from bond development. Now, none of that takes away from the mechanics of battling itself. There are so many ways to strategize the development of your characters, and while I certainly found some units to be more powerful and useful than others, this combat system is rewarding when played well and punishing when important elements are ignored. It is not difficult to the point of being inaccessible. The developers have gone a long way to giving you the ability to move characters into position and see what the outcome of a battle would be, or the likely outcome of a battle would be, prior to committing to an action. There is also the ability to go back in time through as many turns as you'd like in case you made a mistake that led to the death of a character that you really don't want to lose. But there is a depth that will give strategy RPG enthusiasts plenty of reason to come back and theory craft a new way to build their favorite characters. As for the maps, thankfully it felt like none of them were the same. There were environmental effects, which could mean the difference between victory and defeat, weapons and tactics specific to the maps, like utilizing long-range ballistas or leveraging bushes and other cover to make your units harder to hit, or clearing out certain hazards like miasma that lower your movement and hit rate. Some of the maps are very large, with several splitting your party up and creating a sort of dual front battle, which really tests the player's abilities to strategize and navigate multiple situations at the same time. Then there's the titular Engage mechanic, which is new to the series. You choose which characters to pair up with which emblem rings. These rings will provide additional abilities and traits to your character while equipped. And as the bond grows between the character and the emblem, your character can learn these traits and abilities permanently. In battle, the emblems will also boost the stats of your character and give them the ability to engage with the emblem. This puts them in a powered up state where they can use the most powerful abilities of the emblem to try to turn the tides of battle. This can be something simple like powerful attacks from Leaf's Quadruple Hit, Roy's Blazing Lion, or Marth's Lodestar Rush, or more complex and complicated abilities that dramatically alter the battlefield, such as Celica's Warp Ragnarok, which teleports the character great distances to deliver a powerful magic attack, or Byleth's Goddess Dance, that allows characters that are directly next to the character that uses it to have another chance to move and take action. This means that players who are taking advantage of everything the system has to offer can combine well-planned positioning with these powerful abilities and be greatly rewarded for their efforts. Now, when I said that gameplay is the strength of Fire Emblem Engage, I am referring almost entirely to the gameplay of battle. Outside of battle is a completely different story. While in between missions, or chapters as they're called, you have the ability to engage in side battles to help build up your team, help out each of the different nations, or increase your bonds with the emblems. Or you can go back to the hub location known as the Somnial. Now, the Somnial is like a floating castle of sorts. It houses the majority of the life sim type elements of Engage. This includes activities that increase the bonds between your characters, such as cooking and enjoying a meal, or tending to livestock, or swimming in the pool, or picking fruit in the orchard and petting the Somnial's mascot, Sami. It also includes some mini games that result in small bonuses to Aleer, additional bond fragments, ingredients for cooking and upgrading your weapons. And this is where the most tedious aspects of Engage come in. The Somnial flat out feels like work, a sort of checklist of things that you can skip, but you may regret it. The worst of these is the strength minigames and the ring polishing. The strength minigames are 3 different games that, if done well, can temporarily increase Aleer's strength, dexterity, or HP for the next battle. These feel like the worst kind of afterthoughts thrown into a game. Mashing on the buttons to make Aleer complete a sit-up, or timing button presses with the input lag of the game to hit a small target area to complete a push-up at varying speeds are just tedious and dreadful. I honestly just defaulted to push-ups because I didn't have to mash the button until my controller stopped working like I did if I was doing sit-ups, or I got carpal tunnel. The DDR style control game to me just didn't click with my brain past hard mode. I would have taken a slightly worse bonus to skip the whole thing. About midway through the story, there's a poorly explained wyvern riding minigame, which isn't terrible and can give you some nice bonuses to bond fragments and items, and the fishing minigame is done fairly well. Then there's the ring polishing. This is meant as another way to boost bond level between characters and the emblem rings, but good God, does it come off as slapped on, tedious, and downright stupid. The emblems make comments either encouraging or disapproving of your cleaning technique, and when you finally have a full set of 12 rings and you're polishing all 12 one at a time and moving up and down character lists and trying to remember which character you needed to level up a bond with, I think you can see where I'm going with this. This is not pointless in its effect on the game, but I almost wish it was, because doing it once or twice, I never wanted to do it again, but I had to. There are other elements to the Somnial, such as the arena, the shops, a flea market that you can buy items that generally help increase bonds between different characters, and more, but this is by far the weakest part of Fire Emblem. The arena is kind of important because it gives you opportunity to build up some extra experience with your characters, also to build bonds between emblems and characters if there's a specific one you want to boost up and spend a bunch of bond fragments to do it. But by far the weakest part of Fire Emblem Engage, and I think that because this was the strength of Three Houses, this is one of the primary points of contention when you look at reviews as well as fan feedback. Die-hard Three Houses fans will be surely disappointed with the Somniel, even though its graphics put the monastery to shame. If gameplay was down to the battle system, classes, emblems, etc., this game would probably be a 5. But with the slapped-on minigames and the tedium that is the Somniel, I have to dock a half a point down to 4.5 for gameplay. On to another high point, graphics and performance. The graphics of Fire Emblem Engage are some of the best on the Nintendo Switch. Characters are bright, well animated, have their own aesthetic and style, and the battle animations are flawless. In my short time playing Three Houses, it is clear to me that there is a night and day difference between the graphics of the two games. Fire Emblem Engage makes Three Houses look like it was from a prior generation of Nintendo systems, and the quality is consistent throughout the game. I can think of several premium titles recently released on the Switch that this game puts to shame, both in terms of graphics and performance. And for everyone who says the Nintendo Switch is too old and too underpowered, this is one of the games that you can hold up as an example that the Switch can still produce excellent quality games in terms of graphics and performance. Now, while Fire Emblem Engage definitely leans into a more modern anime art style than prior entries to the series, and that can certainly be a polarizing choice, there is no doubt that Fire Emblem Engage is graphically one of the most impressive titles to come to the Switch in some time. This game looks flat out great for 99% of the game. The characters are bright, stylized, well animated, and pop off the screen. The backgrounds and environments are light years ahead of Three Houses, including the Somniel, as much as I don't care for it. The ability to run around and check out the battlefield in a third-person perspective after a bird's eye view battle is a nice touch. The cinematics, the particle effects, heck, even the fonts that are used are all top quality. And to top it all off, I experienced almost no performance issues in my playthrough. The game runs really, really well. I did notice some slowdown in one or two of the late game areas, which I think was due to some of the dynamic environmental effects, but that's 1 or 2 out of 20 something. The rest ran flawlessly. The only other potential gripe for performance is in load times, especially when you're going between certain areas of the Somniel or between the Somniel and the main map. It is significant, not game breaking, but significant. And I suggest that you use the menus to avoid some of that rather than running around the map, getting to a door, entering, getting a load screen, doing whatever menial task that you went to do, then running to the door again, getting another load screen. All those load screens will add up pretty quickly. That all being said, and especially considering some of the AAA games that we've seen come out recently for the Switch, Fire Emblem Engage is pretty close to as good as it gets in terms of graphics and performance on the Nintendo Switch. It's a truly impressive game, and it's the type of game that gives Switch owners hope that there's still some life in the old girl. So for graphics and performance, I give Fire Emblem Engage 4.5 out of 5. Next up, music and sound effects, another strong performance for Fire Emblem Engage. The songs are appropriate to the scenes, add sufficient tension and excitement, and are consistently good. Voice acting is good for the most part. All cutscenes and bond conversations are fully voice acted. The sounds of battle are high quality and give the proper weighty effect of clashing swords, spears, axes, and shields. Powerful magics convey their strength well through sound. The Engage attacks in particular have excellent sound effects to them, adding to the positive feedback from using them to decimate your enemies. I can't remember any particular out of place sounds or songs, and the biggest issue in terms of sound would be from some occasionally cringy lines of dialogue. Overall, it's not the most memorable soundtrack, but it is solid. For music and sound effects, I give Fire Emblem Engage 4.0 out of 5. On now to fun factor, and this is a difficult one for me. The battle system provides a lot of fun, and having the ability to increase the consequences with classic mode can really dial up the anxiety of making the wrong move. I did find that in many situations the best approach was just to circle the wagons and back up until you can safely lure a few units at a time. In any event, the battle system definitely provided the most fun. On the other hand, there is almost nothing fun about the Somniel. Between the tedious mini-games, non-stop menu micromanaging, and the fact that ignoring any of these things can hurt your combat effectiveness, this is by far the worst part of Fire Emblem Engage. I almost wish there was an additional mode of the game that completely ignored the Somniel, as you can manage social links, inventories, shops, all of it, from the menus before battle and on the world map. It just comes down to the additional points you can get from the strength testing, polishing rings, petting and feeding Sami, choosing an ally to compete in the arena to gain additional experience, and every time you go back to the Somniel to do this, it takes you out of the story and the flow of the battles. The other thing that affects the fun factor for me is the game does outstay its welcome with several chapters left in the story. Some chapters feel like filler, and many of the battles can take an hour of real time to complete, at least for me as a novice Fire Emblem player. Adding copious amounts of cutscenes and then all of the bond scenes, and it ends up with a very bloated runtime that hampers my enjoyment of the game. Because each of these elements is mandatory in Fire Emblem Engage, I have to factor them all into fun factor, and because of that, that brings Engage's score down to a 3.0 out of 5. Finally, for the overall score, I did enjoy Fire Emblem Engage, and there are many areas where it excels, especially considering it is a Switch exclusive. The graphics and gameplay are stellar and really raise the bar for the Switch when taken into consideration with other recent big title releases. Unfortunately, those two strengths are bogged down by the bloated content of a story that outstays its welcome and the tedium of the Somniel. I think that Fire Emblem veterans who enjoy the combat aspects of building up characters with different classes and emblems and looking for ways to conquer the challenges of the more difficult modes, this is a must-buy. But for a newcomer to the series and a more casual player, I would say wait for a sale. Overall, I give Fire Emblem Engage a 4.0 out of 5. So let me know in the comments down below, what do you think of Fire Emblem Engage? Subscribe for more content just like this. If you'd like to check out all the games I beat last year, ranked from worst to best, check out this video right here. And until next time, I will see you there.